Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. The modern attack surface is vast and permeable, extending from the data center to the cloud and device edge. Security teams are stretched thinner and thinner as they try to cover this ground. The result? More high-profile breaches hit the news every day. Don't let your organization be next. ExtraHop delivers security from the inside out, helping enterprise security teams detect threats up to 95% faster and cut staff time to resolve by 2/3 or more. Act with confidence. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly. Major data security breaches continue to make headlines. Are you prepared? Standardizing your security framework will help you stay competitive, be a reliable business partner, and manage intellectual property, financials, and employee and customer information. The American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, offers the standards you need in one place through standard subscriptions, a cost-saving, fully customizable solution. Sign up for your free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian. We've heard from our listeners that they love our content, but the amount of content we distribute can sometimes be a little overwhelming. We've recently released our customizable listener interest list. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe and click the button to join the listener list and let us know your interests. I think we have about 54, 55 different categories that we're trying to help understand what you guys are interested in and make sure we can get that content back to you. Also, register for our upcoming webcast with both Observe It and Kaseya by going to securityweekly.com/webcast. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, let's get into the articles this week. So I wanted to start first. I take listener feedback very seriously. Paul, you and I did a article review last week on identifying natural leaders, and I got a comment from the audience about, well, he's just a freelance writer. Maybe he's not really authoritative. Why should we give him any credit? And so I took that to heart. I did. I went out and I researched the author. And he had done a lot of writing around leadership and different leadership topics. And so maybe he does have some level of authority, but it made me think about when I was going through the articles this week, I'm like, all right, maybe, I should focus in on some existing leaders to comment instead of maybe just freelance writers. But so I took it to heart. And definitely wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit on the show, because look, if any of our listeners have any feedback for us, you guys can send an email to bsw@securityweekly.com or net. This one happened to come through LinkedIn through one of my connections, but I read all this stuff, so I take it extremely seriously, and would love to hear your feedback. So this week I decided, all right, let's bring in an article that is leadership from somebody in the leadership. And so there's a really good, this is a 2-part series. This is part 1. And this is an interview with Keith Cratch, who's the former chairman, CEO at DocuSign, was part of Ariba. He's now in the government side. But this is a 2-part article on the making of a technology leader. And I thought, well, what a better article to cover on leadership than coming from somebody who came from a leadership position. So I wanted to review this one a little bit with you today, Paul.
Awesome.
Did you get a chance to look at this one?
Was this the first one that the making of a technology leader?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I hadn't read that one yet.
Oh, okay.
I skipped around.
So this goes into the early part of Keith's career, and he starts his career at GM. He's more on he creates a joint venture with on the robotic side. He's very in the trenches, and he grew up he was born in Lakewood, Ohio. I'm an Ohio boy, for those that don't know. So it's always interesting to watch this, right? I mean, growing up, my dad worked in the auto manufacturing industry for years. I mean, that's how you grew up in the North Shore of Ohio. It was coming out of Detroit. It was GM, Ford, or Chrysler at the time. And so he gets his roots at GM, ends up creating a joint venture on the robotic side, he went to Harvard Business School, eventually goes on, and the article kind of stops at the precipice of starting Ariba, which is the procurement system. And Paul, what's really interesting in this article, he talks about category definition and being a category king.
Mm-hmm.
Even in an early part of his career, as he was making some of his early moves, he reflects on some of the decisions he made in his early part of his career that he learned from, that also kind of hampered him a little bit. One of the stories is he went to a startup and they asked him to say something on a call that wasn't true, and he said, "No, I'm not going to do it." Right? I don't believe in that. I'm all about transparency. It's kind of a cultural thing, and it basically shortened his career at that company. But he learned from that and applied that into the culture he created at other startups, and also the whole concept of building out your category, all on the verge of coming to Ariba. We'll cover part 2 when it comes out, maybe next week. I didn't see when part 2 is going to come out, but I want to see the rest of the story of his transition into Ariba, then to DocuSign, and some of the other lessons learned. But this is a really good kind of historical view of a technology leader and kind of some of the decisions he had to make in his early part of the career to get where he is.
Yeah, the good ones always talk about category creation.
They do. Yeah. He has a really interesting background here that I just thought was a great read for anybody in a technology leadership position, because he didn't start really in tech, but more manufacturing, not software, and converted and kind of transformed into a security software leader. All right. Did you read the next one?
Yeah, I like this one a lot better.
This one, I love this one. Because I've done strategy for a couple of organizations, right? And there's aspects about strategy that are good, and there's aspects about strategy that are bad. And this article tries to go out and talk about the 5 myths about strategy, the good and the bad. And so again, if you're in kind of a strategy role, this is a really good read. So let's start with number 1, right? Strategy is about the long term. It is, but it isn't. And what's interesting here is that strategy is not about something that you're going to do longer term. It's about making decisions now that put you on a path for the changes that will be longer term. And look, the story that's near and dear to my heart is when we were at Tenable, Paul, right? I mean, we knew that changes were happening, and the question wasn't about waiting until those happened to do something about it. It was about what were the strategic decisions and moves you had to make in the short term to prepare for the long-term trends that we were starting to see. And so that this one resonated with me.
Yeah, and I think this entire article kind of goes along that theme, Matt, that business has changed, especially in technology, where if you're not trying to stay ahead, once you get behind, it's too late. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because technology moves too fast today. And so I love the thing like competitive advantage is dead. And I will twist that and say the days of you not having competition are probably long gone, right? Like you're always going to have competition. That's not to say you can't position yourself as the category king, but you're pretty much always going to have competition just because the ease at which someone can spin up a company, a service, or a product with today's technology.
Yeah, and I think this is the interesting one when we think about category definition and defining category kings. You still need to do it better or differently than your competition to stay ahead of them.
To stay as category king.
Right, to stay as category king. You can't stop. Amazon's not stopping. Google's not stopping. Netflix isn't going to stop. These category kings are going to constantly evolve.
Matt, you left Apple out of that list.
I did, but not on purpose.
Okay. That they could be one of the category kings that are slipping. My opinion.
Well, yeah, they could be. You know, we've talked a lot about Facebook and some of the challenges Facebook has had this year. Are they slipping a little bit in some of the changes that they've made? But you're right. Good category kings are always trying to figure out how to raise the bar to keep the competition at bay and to make it harder to enter into the space. But that means you have to articulate that you are doing things either better and or differently than your competition to continue to strive. And if you just think you're going to go out and create a category without that differentiation, you're sadly mistaken.
I think
they talk about it.
Steve Jobs did a lot of things well, and a lot of things not so well. As he's a very public figure, we know a lot about his life. In the context of this conversation, I think Steve Jobs did two things well that really left a gap when he left Apple. And I'm saying this as you have your own companies or you're looking to work with a company, we're looking for this person in that company, right? Steve Jobs was the best at category creation. I mean, if you look at the iPod to the iPhone to the iPad, I mean, he hit like 3 grand slams, making him the category king of category kings. The other thing that Steve Jobs did very, very well was have this amazing vision. It was creative. It was creating the need before the need existed. He just had that vision for all of the products that many of the products that he led in his career. Some of them were failures, and that's okay. I truly think you got to have someone that has failed a couple times and to figure things out, right? But those are two things he did very well, and I think it's a model as you design and implement and create your strategy for your business that you have to think ahead and have that vision, and also think about what you can do to solidify yourself in a category as the king and maintain that position, or go create other categories that you are now the king of product categories. So,
yeah, and that kind of ties in a little bit to number 4 myth here, is that you don't need a strategy, you just need to be agile. And the article says, look, agility is not a strategy, it's a capability.
Yes.
You still have to understand vision and where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Agility allows you to make shifts as the market shifts around to accomplish some of that end goal and some of that vision, but it's not a replacement for a strategy. And I think a lot of people think, you know, with DevOps and being agile, you still don't need a strategy. You just need to have that agility, and that's enough. And this article specifically talks about, no, you still need kind of that end state vision of where you're going to make the adjustments along the way.
It's great that you can run really fast, but you got to know where you're going.
Otherwise, you're going to go really fast into a gutter.
Off the cliff, right? Or into a hole, right?
Exactly. And then the last point here is you need a digital strategy. And they said, no, don't think about digital separately. Digital strategy is part of a broader strategy. You can't think just about the digital aspects. There's a lot of other components in your strategy when it comes to culture and HR and finance and all these other things. Digital is just a component of that overall strategy, where a lot of people think, oh, all you have to do is worry about a digital strategy. No, there's more to a company than just the digital aspects of it.
Yep, agreed.
This was a really good article. I was going to cover this last week, and we had enough articles, so I pushed it to this week.
That was a good article. I liked it.
We cover it. Yeah. Number 3, key to success for cyber resilient companies: frequent communication with leadership. This is a survey. You know, you and I talk a lot about different surveys that are out there. Some are better than others. There's some interesting results in here, which is why I included it. It talks about more than half of cyber resilient companies have frequent communication with senior leaders, which I think is something that's interesting to think about, right? Is that communications as part of your overall cyber resilience strategy is important. It helps to align the senior management goals and objectives with what you're doing from your cybersecurity program. We talked a lot about this last week on our ServiceNow webcast, for example, that alignment of business goals and your overall security program. More than 80% of respondents and high-performing organizations were able to invest in automation for cyber resilience, which means by having the conversations with the senior leaders, they were able to get the budgets they needed to actually invest in aspects of automation in the cyber resilience space, which I thought was positive and good. And then nearly 3/4 of high-performing organizations are highly confident in their ability to prevent a cyber attack, which is, I mean, that's really positive news because I'm not sure that most of us think it's that high, actually.
I like how they framed it as resilient. I think that accomplishes a couple things. I think many technical folks may underestimate, or even management underestimating leadership in the ability to understand security and what secure actually means. And I think oftentimes we pitch it as we need to do this so we are, air quotes, secure, right? Or more secure, or so we have some security. And that's like not the whole picture. I think framing it as resilient is much better, right? Because at any point in time that you pick, like, we're secure, the next second goes by and you may not be, right? So resiliency, I think, is a term that should enter into these conversations that we're having with leadership on how you can be more resilient.
Yeah, to your point, Paul, right? We can't prevent everything, but if we can detect and respond to it in a timely fashion to minimize impact, that's cyber resiliency. It's all of those components working together because we're not going to prevent everything. But if we can detect it and respond to it quickly and therefore minimize the overall impact, I am now more cyber resilient.
Because I think that relates itself to other risks to the business, right? In financials, in other types of resiliency, in, cyber-ish systems, like think equipment or manufacturing, right? You run through the scenario. What happens if this machine fails? How do we minimize the impact of something failing, right? And a breach is just a failure on many different levels, right, of your overall security program, one could say. But if you're resilient and you can minimize the impact, then you're really winning, because you can't prevent lightning from striking one of your machines and blowing it up, right?
Right. Or prevent a hurricane from hitting your data center and flooding it.
Exactly.
Right. That's how you respond to it.
But security is more about, I think, business continuity planning than at that level, in the leadership level, right? I think that's how you have to frame it.
Yeah, but we don't talk about it that way.
No, we don't. You're right.
Think about how we talk about it. We talk about the Security Operations Center and incident response and all these fancy capabilities, but we don't talk about it from a business continuity recovery perspective.
Yep.
Kind of forgot that piece a little bit, I think, somewhere along the way.
That's a good article. I like it.
Yeah. Want fewer employees to quit? Listen to them. So this is an experiment study that was done to prove out aspects of how do you solicit feedback from your employees, and by listening to them, they are less likely to leave the organization. And as we all know, look, it's hard to hire in our industry, and when we have good talent, the ability to retain that talent is something that's important. So this article in Harvard Business Review talks about the study that they did. It's actually done in India, and it was done right after a minimum wage increase in the large factories, and how they solicited feedback from the employees, because the employees were actually not very happy with the price increase or the minimum raise increase for their rates, because they thought it was smaller than the last one they got. But what they did is they were soliciting feedback directly from them. And even though they weren't happy with the raise, there was higher retention and not a lot of turnover in that environment. So they were using it to really test out the waters of how important is that feedback from employees to employer in overall retention rates and keeping your employees happy.
Yeah, and just PSA for those listening, it's not about like violating your employees' privacy and bugging their phones or chats or communications. That's not, listening is different. It's not a listening device or listening software, right? It's actually talking to people is important.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something I take very personally when I come into studio. For example, last week, every time I come in, we sit the team down it's full transparency. Everything's on the table. We have a conversation. Where are we? How are we doing? What are some of the things we're working on for the month and the quarter? It's the opportunity for the employees to give us, you and I, Paul, very direct feedback. Look, I want that feedback.
Absolutely.
Just like I want it from our listeners, right? If they see something that we're not covering or articles that, may or may not be valid, I want that feedback just as much, because my goal is, one, I want happy listeners, I want happy employees.
Right.
I want
right.
both.
And you only achieve that if you actually listen.
Correct.
For sure.
Very important part. Next article, automation complicates recruiting in the cybersecurity space, survey finds. Again, interesting survey. But what this one really highlights is, as we think about automation and cybersecurity, it's also going to impact the skills we need in our space, and therefore will impact the types of skills we're recruiting for. And we did Application Security Weekly earlier, and we were actually talking about aspects of this from a DevOps perspective, right? We were talking about how automation is a key component into DevOps, and the skill sets there from a security perspective really need to be more aligned to development resources, because it's all about coding these automations as part of the overall dev kind of SecOps process, for lack of a better phrase. This article then reinforces aspects of this to say, look, as we also want to do automation and cybersecurity, that will also change the types of skills we'll be recruiting for, maybe more coding skills actually in our space over time. And recruiters need to adjust to this as they start looking to recruit new people into our industry.
Yeah, and I don't want people to get the wrong impression, right? I don't want to see the industry go towards trying to hire only people that have the skills or have accumulated skills that they can implement automation, right? I would totally hire someone that understood all of the fundamentals and has done it without automation, and have them learn how to automate those processes. I think it's more important for them to have some understanding about what those processes are and how they work, rather than automation. Because look, you're not going to get students out of college that have completely automated workflows inside of a SOC, right? But they may have a lot of the fundamentals and the right aptitude to work in the field. And for me, as someone who hires people, that's more important.
Yeah, and understanding the process and understanding where you can make improvement in the process will actually help with some of this automation. Even though you're not doing it, you could still be a very key contributor into making some of these enhancements to actually improve some of your processes.
Absolutely.
The last article is on hiring as well. Some of these articles are always interesting for me because I look at them. Hiring and wage trends send a clear signal to small businesses: lure workers or lose them. Again, I think this is a struggle for us sometimes, is, as we go to look for talent, we're at an all-time, pretty much a 50-year low when it comes to unemployment. And what we're now starting to see in the job market is really tightening of skill sets. And if you're not trying to attract and lure talent, they are getting attracted and lured by others. And I think this is a real big challenge for small to medium businesses, where they may not have the same amount of money to throw at resources. You and I know this as a small business, Paul, right?
And we're hiring for a software developer too. So
just
throwing that out there.
This is one of our challenges, right? Is we're hiring for a software developer that we want to bring in and really work closely with us to improve our processes and producing our podcasts. But we're also competing with large enterprises. And so how do we attract talent? And I think this is a challenge for all small to medium businesses. So this article talks a little bit about some of the things you're going to have to do to compete and keep your employees happy in order for them not to get pulled away to other larger organizations that may just throw more money at it.
Yeah. It's interesting. You end up in like this gap sometimes, right? Where those that are graduating and or just getting into a field don't necessarily need a degree, but getting into the field, and they're attracted to those larger companies that have those, larger salaries and such. But as they go through, you may not realize that's not really the work environment you want to be in. It's maybe not the job that you want to do. It was different from what you hired for. Were hired for in all of those things, and then they come out of that with more experience, and they try to go to a smaller company, and they've got some interesting decisions to make. Like, where do I go next? Do they start their own thing? Do they go work for a smaller company? And there's a lot of interesting things that happen in people's careers, but I guess the advice is talk to people that have been there before and work some of those jobs and get their experiences before you start making your decisions.
Yeah, part of my decision process was, as I've moved in my career, it wasn't always money, right? It was culture.
Yep.
It was about the opportunity. It was about, that need to be part of an organization and have a purpose, right? There's sometimes a lot more components that go into your job search and your retention requirements, by the way, than just money. And you got to, talk to people and understand what are those drivers that make you that interests you in getting a fulfilling career. And it's not always money, folks. I'll tell you that right now. Trust me, I've walked away from a couple jobs that my wife scratches her head going, "What are you doing?" I said, "Look, if I can't be effective, if I can't make a difference, I'm going to be miserable. Why would I stay?" Right? That's a part of your decisioning process.
And it's harder in a big company too, because you will have the desire to do things and expand your responsibilities and knowledge. But in a larger company, there's another person or a whole division that might be responsible for that, for which you have no control over, right? So you can be somewhat limited in larger organizations and smaller ones too, right? You may get more responsibility, more of the things you want to do, but the transition off of that might be slower. So there's a lot of things to consider with your career.
Yeah, there's an interesting balance on company size, right? When it's too small, sometimes when it's a smaller organization, you do everything. When you get into the larger organizations, you can't influence anything anymore. And sometimes there's a sweet spot in the middle, and that's where I always thrive, because
it's funny you say that, Matt. I've left companies for both of those reasons, right? Too small, I had to wear too many hats, and too large, I'm just like pigeonholed into one kind of position. So,
yep, exactly right. Yes.
And I think in both cases, the opportunity to expand and grow is limited in both those use cases, right?
They are. I mean, that was always the kind of the my inside joke with my wife and others. They knew once the company got to a certain size, I was going to leave, because I knew I couldn't be effective anymore. Right? Once you got to 1,000+ employees, I was probably done. I couldn't make an impact anymore. Time to go.
Agreed.
I do like the smaller side personally, because I don't mind doing having
certain
more
number
responsibility
of hats.
and doing more. Yeah.
Depends on what the hats are. Totally agree. Yeah.
It's true. Yeah. I just thrive better in that environment personally, so I enjoy it more.
Right. I mean, I think that was a decision for me to come to Security Weekly, right? Was I do have to wear a lot of hats, but they're ones I like wearing. Right? Yeah. So it's good.
If you enjoy what you're doing and you're happy doing it every single day, I mean, you're right where you want to be.
Right.
Yeah. All right. That's all the articles I had for this week. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.